Gotta leave early and get my daughter some snow.
It's not because of you.
Okay, I won't take it personally.
I might have left anyway because of you.
Okay.
I didn't know.
Yogurt tastes like it comes from ice cream tastes like it comes from cream. Doesn't taste so fresh. Cream tastes like it does not have an origin.
Okay, but you know.
You mix those two. That's whipped cream. The cream is oh, that is
That kind of cream.
Yeah.
Right.
Processed cream. Comes out of a can, it's really processed. I get what you're saying.
I mean, if I find cream that's good, I'll try it. I have to say pause. All right.
With
Let's
that.
start. With that being said, we are having our next speaker giving us a Western Ubuntu course.
Yes,
Giving us a pulpit.
I do.
For you people have a tendency of respecting time, so I'll just leave it to you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, philosophers and philosophers, I have a few disclaimers. First, I have to admit that the bulk of my research time went into translating José Castellanos' chapter, which was in Portuguese. As a casual Portuguese speaker, I completely underestimated not only academic Portuguese, but philosophical Portuguese, so please bear that with me. And secondly, I have received threats of pressing questions from some of my peers, to which I reply, I want all the smoke. Okay, with that being said, Carl Jung is a psychoanalyst, and in chapter 1 of his book, Man and His Symbols, he compares the human race to a person influenced by unconscious powers, and says that this person keeps problems tucked away in separate drawers. This has left the world in a dissociated state, and he compares this to a neurotic. There is now, as he calls, an iron curtain marking a symbolic line of division. Because of this dissociation, Jung says that there's a strange feeling of helplessness that many people in Western societies feel, and I believe that due to Western influence, we can extend that sphere to a nearly global scale. Jung then notes that one's existence is lost and miserable if his purpose is merely getting and spending, without a sense of wider meaning. Now, we know that his book is called Man and His Symbols, so it seems like Carl Jung thinks that we need symbolic meaning in our lives, and I propose that perhaps Ubuntu is a philosophy that can remedy this diagnosis of isolation that individuals might feel. So we are now realizing that the difficulties confronting society are moral problems that can no longer be answered through economic competition, nor through stockpiling nuclear arms. Jung says that the vices of the West have been covered up by good international manners, but only so much can be swept under the rug. Diplomatic lies, systematic deception, and veiled threats make up the face of his own shadow that grins at Western man from the other side of the curtain. While mental and moral means would be more efficient at addressing these issues, they will continue to be ineffective as long as we try to convince ourselves that the people on the other side are wrong. Jung encourages us to familiarize ourselves with our own shadow and our own nefarious doings. Our only disadvantage is that we neither see nor want to understand what we ourselves are doing wrong under the guise of good manners. So what I am proposing is not a solution to end all solutions. Even our psychoanalyst acknowledges that in real life there exist polar opposites, and we are not sure that good will overcome evil or that joy will defeat pain. When life ceases to be a battleground, then existence will come to an end as well. Jung believes that mankind needs something to believe in, and we have become so civilized that we have lost faith in a supreme being. In fact, early in the chapter, Jung says that civilized consciousness has separated itself from basic instinct. Now that modern man is rational and has freed himself from superstition, Jung believes that he has lost his spiritual values to an alarming degree. Through colonization, this phenomenon has spread to the continent of Africa as well, and anthropologists have described that when a society's spiritual values are exposed to modern civilization, people lose meaning in their lives. Social organization is disintegrated and they morally decay. Earlier, instinctive concepts could come to the mind of mankind and his conscious mind would be able to integrate them into a coherent pattern. The civilized person can no longer do this. Since we have grown our understanding of science, our world has become dehumanized. Man is now isolated in the universe because he is no longer in touch with nature and has lost his emotional, unconscious identity with the natural phenomena. Side note, I urge everyone this weekend to go outside and touch some grass. Heidegger was also wary of this. Predicting the loss of human essence to the dangers of calculative thinking, Heidegger was afraid that everything, including humans, would be reduced to mere resources to be optimized and exploited. Jung agrees with Heidegger and says that our scientific and inventive mind has a tendency to create dangerous technology suitable for our own suicide. Plus, with the world's population growing, we're looking for ways to mitigate this, and nature seems to have anticipated it by allowing us to destroy ourselves. How do we brag about dominating nature when we are still at her mercy because we can't control our own nature? Jung shows how ironic this is that we fight against each other claiming superiority over one another just like we would in the state of nature. Jung is optimistic that there must be a change that could start with an individual, perhaps someone in this room, perhaps even by an unconscious mind, because conscious minds don't seem to give us the answer right now. I ask you all today, what is more instinctual than empathy? Have you ever seen someone plant their face in the soil? And before you laughed, didn't you go, ooh, that looks like it hurt? I am hesitant to introduce Ubuntu now as an instinctual remedy, but perhaps it is so ingrained in some people that it is like a second nature, pun intended. Ramosa claims that Ubuntu as a philosophy can be found all the way from the Nubian desert to the Cape of Good Hope, and from Senegal all the way to Zanzibar. It's a north, south, east, west thing I got going on over there. Okay. Let me explain how it links to ontology, epistemology, and ethics, because I want to prove that Ubuntu is not just an ethno-philosophy. Here we have Ubu, which counts as our sign. This explains being in general. That's the prefix. Here we have the root, which counts as the manifestation or the Erscheinung, if I can borrow a German philosophical word. And over here, we have the specific being as opposed to the general being, and this refers to a moral, political entity. So, I want us to pay attention to the fact that we can't separate these two like we do in Cartesian dualism. One can't exist without the other. Moving on to epistemology, if we take the word Ubuntu, it is closely linked to Ubuntu, so that it can express the conditions of Ubuntu. How Ubuntu behaves has a direct focus on Ubuntu. So if you understand I am because you are, this phrase highlights that our existence as individuals can only be understood through other members of the community. Our humanity can only manifest itself when we recognize the humanity of others. Human behavior is the basis of relationships between people. From this, we can derive ethical characteristics. Behaving in a human way means respecting others and perhaps even being altruistic. In terms of Ubuntu, existing is not enough to be a human. To say, that is a man, or that is a woman, or even that is a person, doesn't mean anything if they don't respect others, or listen to others, or is forgiving or understanding. I hope that briefly shows how it is more than just an ethno-philosophy. Unlike Afrocentrism, Ubuntu is based on an affirmative construction of self, whereas Afrocentrism leans towards a deconstructive denial of the Western other. According to Nyaomwe and Mkabela, a simple definition of Ubuntu has to do with the concept of being with others, as well as a code of conduct that aims to articulate respect and compassion for others. If we have to translate it directly, the full phrase Umuntu, Ngumuntu, Ngabantu can be roughly translated to a person is a person through other persons. First, in addressing the ailments of Western society, I would like to refer back to Young's proposal that we need to familiarize ourselves with our own shadows. In José Castellanos' writings, he makes reference to an Ivy Goduka, who is a Xhosa philosopher hailing from the Eastern Cape in South Africa, the home of Ubuntu philosophy. And her first principle of Ubuntu is the individual's responsibility to self-healing. Goduka believes that one must have a healthy internal life before they can know peace. This also means that physically we must take care of our bodies through proper diet, exercise, meditation, and perhaps most importantly, abstaining from excessive alcohol use. I'm looking at you, Peter. Or smoking that may impair our social lives. Another of Goduka's principles addresses Young's call for mankind to believe in a symbolic supreme being. She believes that spirit is at the heart of all existence in nature. Whether living or non-living, they are the foundation of spiritual reality. And according to Goduka, African cultures and traditions revolve around establishing communication with various forms of manifestations of spirituality. This also includes our relationships among people, living creatures, and non-living things, because nothing exists in isolation. Our relationships in our African families extends horizontally to our extended families, our cousins, our aunties, our uncles, but also vertically, including the deceased as well as those soon to be born. And this may explain why ancestors are so revered in African belief systems. Since one of the principles of Ubuntu is the pervasiveness of spirit in all things, nature is deemed as a result of creation from the Great Spirit. Therefore, Africans have a close relationship to the land. As opposed to the European belief that land belongs to the people, the African belief is that we belong to the land. And this requires from us a collective responsibility to care for Mother Earth. Another principle of Ubuntu, according to Goduka, that is another principle of Ubuntu. One way that we can see this Ubuntu symbolism in, that's crazy. Oh, but no, I've got 5 minutes, okay. One way that we can see this Ubuntu symbolism in Western religion is in the story of the creation of Adam. In Genesis 2, verse 7, God formed man from the dust and breathed life into his nostrils. The implication in African spirituality is that this life force is all around us, which explains why the word for spirit and air in Bantu languages is often one and the same. Does anyone know what it is? Thank you. Umoya, spirit, and air. As long as we all have this life force, no one is above the other. According to Ubuntu, we cannot justify people with power treating subordinates in an inhumane way. Goduka emphasizes that intellectuals must seriously engage with the development of these principles. By doing so, we must be aware that we are implicitly confronting individual and collective historical experiences tied to the supremacy of colonialism, capitalism, imperialism, racism, and oppressive systems in general. Domination has denied the right of children to learn their own cultures. What happened to the good old imperialism of Alexander the Great when he just let us be who we are? One way we have seen a critical engagement with oppressive systems was the Peace and Reconciliation Commission. This was based on 3 fundamental steps. The first was that those responsible for and those that benefited from apartheid must confess their wrongs. The second step was that the victims must display compassion and forgive those that trespassed against them. And, is this your pen? Oh, it's mine now. Desmond Tutu said, "If I have stolen your pen, I can't really be contrite when I say, 'Please forgive me,' if at the same time I'm going to keep your pen. If I am truly repentant, I will demonstrate this genuine repentance by returning your pen. Please forgive me." Okay, cool. For Castellano, his first priority was not the restitution of stolen goods or actions perpetrated by, but a restoration of the situation of human existence among people that were prejudiced against one another. Reconciliation doesn't mean avoiding confrontation between people on opposing sides. Neither does it mean making peace with evil or immorality or injustice. It is the exercise of free speech at the highest level to appeal to a human quality in both the oppressor and the oppressed, because both need to be liberated. We saw this in the case of Dylan Roof, who shot multiple people at a church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015. While he was being sentenced to death, the mother of one of the victims said to him, "I forgive you." Above all, Ubuntu appeals to humanity. The strong help the weak and don't take advantage of others. The fortunate help the impoverished. Without this quality, no matter how powerful or prosperous a person is, Some may see the person lacking Ubuntu as deserving of pity. To put this into context, I'll give a few real-life examples. When Haiti gained independence from France in 1804, they were forced to pay France reparations for the lost property of their oppressors. The lost property included the Haitian enslaved people themselves. Haiti started making payments in 1825, and in 1911, the debt had been bought by the US government. The debt was settled in 1947, paying off the interest to the National City Bank of New York, formerly known as Citibank today. It must be noted that in 2016, the Parliament of France repealed the 1825 Ordinance of Charles X. Since then, France has given a lot of aid to Haiti in a show of good international manners, but no reparations have been offered. This is to avoid more claims from former colonies, conveniently also avoiding addressing their wrongs. Does this sound like dissociation to you? Because it does to me. It is no coincidence that Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So, what does this all mean? I think what I'm trying to propose is that first, we need to find a way to develop laws founded on values of Ubuntu. Second, we need to get the youth to have an opportunity to appreciate these values, because lack of knowledge seems to be the principal factor in the impression that these values aren't mobilized to reconstruct society. I think we need to make Ubuntu cool. Due to growing Western influence, even the majority of Africans today no longer live according to communal principles or ways of life. We have succumbed to a highly individualized modern way of life. Perhaps if we take Goduka's advice and put it in schools for the children to latch onto, then the future will be in good hands. With that being said, I am starting a cultural center. And we are having our first meeting next week, Friday, at 8 p.m. And you're all invited. Are there any questions?
As a member of the Grad, I've been recruited. I would just 5 minutes for the discussion, but I would extend it because you are here on a mission.
Facts. I'm trying to.
This session goes till 10 after. So,
Yeah.
So yeah, any interaction, such a good presentation.
Yeah. I mean,
Would you like to join the? Would you like to join the cult?
I can ask.
I also.
No, he can ask first.
Okay.
We'll start with the 2 usual people. Go ahead. Okay. So I think Ubuntu, as a philosophy, has been quite confusing to me, because it's presented as this unified sort of commodity or whatever we can call it. But if we look at, I think, every presenter, every author, I think I read mostly Ramosa and Grad, and it's just different conceptions of Ubuntu. And I think one critique that has been, I don't remember why I saw it, is this sort of like universalization of the Zulu version of Ubuntu.
Okay.
So those prefixes that you used, I think, were Zulu, and then would be different in another language. So I'm wondering if are you operating at a certain type of Ubuntu, or is yours universal? Because your examples were universal, but I was also the idea of Ubuntu that you presented was quite new to me. Some aspects of it. Not
Okay.
all, yeah.
So I think you see how I switched between like the German and like the English. I feel like the language doesn't really mean as much as the sentiment itself. I'm from Zambia, so like the words like Umuntu and like Bantu, those are words that we use. But like Sutu people, for example, they use Boto, but like they still have the same sentiment. Like you can literally translate it into their language, and it seems to like have the same philosophy underlying everything.
Okay, the reason I was asking, and I was hoping I wouldn't have to reveal this,
Okay.
is because I think Ubuntu, as I know it, would exclude certain people from. It's so yours, I think, because it was very inviting.
Mhm.
But
I mean, it's a cult. It has to be inviting.
Yeah, but the difference then between that and the Ubuntu philosophy I was using is that it is exclusive, like it accepts a certain kind of a behavior, and then if you don't have that kind of a behavior, then you're excluded from it. Like they would say, "Aunabuntu" or "Aunguntu."
Yeah.
So you're not a person
Right.
because you don't behave in this manner that Ubuntu is prescribing for humanity in
Okay.
that culture.
Okay.
You know, and yeah, so that was the difference. Then.
Okay. I hear that. I think what we need to do when we're critically engaging with a philosophy is that we need to judge it based on its usefulness, using logic and rationality, right? So, like, let's say in Xhosa culture, for example,
Yeah.
you know, people go to the mountains, they get circumcised. That's beneficial in the sense that, you know, there's benefits, like whether it's preventing STDs or, you know, whatever good comes out of it, we need to take that in mind. But let's say we extend that to women in Somalia who experience like female genital mutilation. That we can say that on the surface it's the same thing, but it's really not, because there's no benefits to that. So I think what I'm trying to say is that when we're talking about practices, we need to keep the ones that make sense and the ones that are beneficial for us, as opposed to just, you know, keeping traditions for the sake of traditions. Yeah.
I have had years that
Larry,
People- people,
Students first.
And I might be getting caught up in the example, but saying keeping things that are beneficial. Some things aren't physically beneficial, but they're beneficial to a person's mental state, especially if you're going to have a cultural mental state. I mean, some things bond certain groups of people together, like the term Ubuntu, and then we have a shared identity. Having a shared identity prevents me from treating you the way I would want to be treated, because I see you the same way I see myself. So with the example you gave, I don't know much about it, but even if something doesn't have physical benefit, it can have some other form of benefit, and not everybody might agree. It's easy to agree with the physical benefit, but other forms of benefits are very difficult to agree with. So how are you going to get? How would you get everybody in this cult?
Yeah. I think one of the most important things that I've gathered from Ubuntu is like tolerance. So even though we may not have the same worldviews, even though, you know, we may not identify under the same tribe, acknowledging that, you know, this is a way that you like to do things, this is a kind of life that you like to lead, and it's beneficial for you, then I would say that that's beneficial, that we tolerate other people's differences. Yeah. I don't know if that's. I think tolerance is a big part of it. Yeah.
Thanks. Can you do the parsing of the word again?
Okay. So this is the general prefix. This is the specific prefix for a single person. And then this is the root. So a group of people can be referred to as such. A single person is referred to like this. And then this is the general being, but extends to the philosophy.
So the Ubu is the being,
yeah.
and the so what is the root?
Oh, this is the root.
Yeah. So what does it mean?
Oh, a person.
Person.
Personhood.
Would it be right to say humanity is like a parallel human T?
Yes. would say so. Yeah.
Disagree.
Would you disagree? I mean, you're free to speak on it.
No, it's fine. I think I've had my chance. So we can talk about others outside.
Are there any more questions?
You just wanted that difference.
Yeah, no, I just wanted a clarification, because you said something about Ershine? Ershine though?
Yes, the manifestation. So this is the manifestation, because this is the person.
Okay, so the person is the manifestation of being, is that the idea?
Yes, as I understand it. But I would like to hear your thoughts on this. Since the discourse.
No. I think translating Ubuntu to humanity is it's a reductive translation that doesn't capture the thing as it is.
That's fair.
Yeah. Misses a whole lot of points.
That's right. Yeah, I still have a question. You can show it before.
Can I?
Yeah.
Thanks. Just to note that you and Luto disagree, we might as well have a conversation about ethnophilosophy.
Right.
So there's a conversation to be had there that I see between the two of you. I'm a little bit confused about the first part of the paper and the second part. So
Okay.
I like the second part, the Ubuntu stuff and the way you're doing it. I like that approach. That's fine. It reminds me of Thad Metz, but I think I like it. I like what you're doing.
Sorry, you said it reminds you of?
Thad Metz is a word.
Thaddeus
Metz is a word.
Thaddeus Mex. Okay, I'll have to
Big
look him up.
Ubuntu kind of dude.
Oh, okay.
Is a Jewish guy from the U.S.
Okay.
He works here himself.
Okay.
He's been writing about Ubuntu for a while, and he's interested in Ubuntu in general, and has a big fight with Ramose. I think a character fight, but also one about the amount of metaphysics that Ubuntu should have. So if that is just bare bones metaphysics, Ubuntu, devoid of exotic metaphysics, whereas Ramose thinks that you need to buy the whole thing, right?
Right.
So it's a debate worth engaging. There's a lot of animosity in that debate, but it might be interesting. But the thing I'm concerned about is the stuff with Jung. I was wondering, you seem to be given pragmatic reasons, and I'm not talking about American pragmatism, I'm talking about pragmatic reasons for believing in the enchantment of the world. Like and that's not a good. That doesn't seem to be a good reason for holding. So just because it feels good or it makes me healthier,
Okay.
doesn't mean that I should hold true.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering if you have a stronger argument in favor of the enchantment story. I mean, I'm very sympathetic.
Mm.
I mean, I'm coming here from. I'm not even sure that I'm arguing against you. I'm putting myself in the position of someone who would argue against you,
Right.
as opposed to arguing against you, because I think there's something about the enchantment, and I think people like Richard Rorty might be good allies, actually, American pragmatists,
Right.
to talk about what we mean by truth and what's going on there.
Yes.
And how is that relevant to the second part of the paper?
Okay. Well, Jung seems to be more interested in going back to like a symbolic way of living. As a psychoanalyst, he thinks that we kind of overlook our instincts now that we become rational and everything. A big part of what he's trying to propose is that we need to like go back to our dreams and like look at the meanings of our dreams so we can come up with like some sort of bridge between us and our unconscious selves. But I'm particularly interested in his fascination with symbolism, because to him, he doesn't believe that he doesn't believe that something has to be true for us to engage with it. He says that sorry, let me just get my thoughts together. He's trying to argue that if we're dealing with something that's unknowable and unseeable, like the Great Spirit, then if it's something that is beneficial, then we should still partake in it. And he gives examples of like the Pueblo Indians. He says that they wake up in the morning, they look at the sun, they like raise their hands to it. And he says that for them, this gives their lives lots of meaning, and he's a great proponent of that.
So that sounds like pragmatic reasons for believing.
Yes.
As opposed to, and if I'm committed to getting it right.
Right. Oh, okay.
I believe it even if I'm miserable sod, you know. But I just can't convince myself to believe that unless I believe it's true.
Right. I think I should take this moment to say it's not actually a cult. You don't have to believe actually everything that I'm saying, but yeah, I think just having pragmatic reasons to engage with it, I think, is useful. Especially if we're trying to take this outside of its African context and show it to people, because I feel like we engage with Buddhism, you know what I mean? We engage with lots of different ideologies, and we don't have to believe them, but there may be benefits in just understanding where they come from.
I agree with that.
Okay.
It's a different issue. But that's great.
Okay.
No, we can continue later.
Okay.
One last chance.
Did you have a question?
Yeah.
I just wanted to follow up on what Pedro was saying. This link might also be quite ephemeral, but with Young, couldn't you go from, you're looking at the realm of the unconscious, which is the crucible in which we're forged to some extent, to like an ontological move of the collective.
Okay.
So if you're looking at relational identity, right, whether through a spiritual enchanted lens or otherwise, looking at it as the basis of the human, and there are many ways to argue that the human is relationally forged, whether we're talking about like language, physical vulnerability and interdependence, or like narratives linked to Young there would be that the unconscious reflects this collective state of formation, and maybe that's something beside like a pragmatic reason.
Something like that.
Okay. No, thank you for that. I'll definitely consider that. Thank you. Young talks a lot about archetypes, and I feel like maybe that may be where you're heading, especially in terms of like the Great Spirit. Yes, thank you.
Well, that's the end of our beautiful session.
Sorry? Carl.